Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Radically Right. This is Jack Otto, your host for this evening. This May the 19th, 2007. We can see ourselves getting closer to a time when tyranny turns into tribulation. As with every week, I'm going to ask you to start off with me in a word of prayer. I'm asking you to join me in prayer for those who are taking a stand against New World Order. And as always, I ask, please, don't just listen to me pray. Add your voice so that a multitude is praying together. Let us pray. Dear Yahweh, God of good, creator of all the universe, God of Abraham and his sons Ishmael and Isaac, our Heavenly Father, thank you for your many blessings. We ask that you shelter us from the forces of evil. Bless our minds with discernment and our voices with your word. Guide our steps that we may follow your way. Cause the New World Order to fail and its conspirators to be exposed and defeated. Give us courage, help, determination, and material resources. Keep us in the hollow of your hand, enshrouded in your Holy Spirit. For we pray in the name of your only begotten Son, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, we're on the precipice of finding out, are we really, truly free people with a constitutionally limited government, a document that protects the limited scope of what they can run on? Or are we the subjects of an all-powerful superstate that's got the right to tell you what's good for you? Tell you what risk you cannot take with yourself? We can see it all coming on as quickly. We can see the time of the end coming on quickly, too. Wars and rumors of wars. Chariots that jostle to and fro in the streets. Flaming torches. Didn't say anything about horses. Talked about chariots. A sign of the time of the end. Corruption in high places. We are waiting for this to come down upon us. I've noticed that freedom really isn't free. It was purchased for us at the price of oil and tears and property and blood. And I got to tell you, many times as I've done this program, I have not paid a nickel. Republic Broadcasting is carrying the brunt of all this expense. And I think it's important to help support this kind of an effort because our children and our grandchildren's freedom are at stake. So I'm asking you to send what support you can to John Stadtmiller at the Republic Broadcasting Organization. Jack Otto with this May the 19th issue of Radically Right. We're going to talk about this New World Order and some of the tentacles that they are trying to insert into us to suck the lifeblood out of us. You too be part of the program by calling in 1-800-313-9443. That's 1-800-313-9443. We find as time goes on here that we are being subjected to more and more tyranny, more laws that just do not comport with the Constitution, and unfortunately, sometimes they don't even make any bones about it, like the income tax law. Here we are paying income tax when the Constitution says very directly that they can only have apportioned taxes. And we have Supreme Court decisions that say that the laws on which they found our income tax really are offering the government no new opportunities to tax. And we find every time we turn around, they're running something. Here up in Michigan, let me tell you about what they did to us in Michigan. It was several times they brought up to vote that we would have this lotto, that the government would be allowed to get into the numbers racket business. And we kept turning it down, and they kept bringing it back up and putting it on the ballot until it finally got through under the promise that every bit of that money, every bit of it, would go to bolstering the schools so that we'd have more money for education. What we didn't realize was they did. They put every penny of it into the school fund, but every penny they stuck into the school fund, they pulled a penny back out and stuck back in the general treasury. So all we're talking about is sleight of hand to get us into this shelf game where they hide money and spend it the way they want and promise whatever they feel like promising and don't feel like they have to keep it. I think what we're talking about here is looking for excuses to suck those after-tax dollars out of our pocket. Every time we turn around, they give us a spin and extract some of our money. And it's so simple for them to come up with new little games, little Ponzi schemes, new little twists to things. Now, there's a community not too far from me, just what we call a downriver area by Detroit. And this area it's called Taylor. And the police are writing people up with traffic tickets for going 2 miles over the speed limit or 5 miles under. I don't know about you, but that seems like tyranny to me. Here we are. We are on the very precipice of our destiny. Are we really, truly free people? Or are we the subjects of an all-powerful superstate? You got to ask yourself, when you're going down the road and you look up in that rearview mirror, what kind of a feeling do you get when you see a cop car behind you? You look up there and you see one cop car, do you get the feeling, oh, good, I'm being protected? Or do you get the feeling, oh, just looking me over, trying to find some kind of excuse to pull me over and suck the money out of my wallet? And you know which kind of a feeling you get. The difference between the two is the difference. Liberty, tyranny. You know, if you want to get right down to the crux of the problem, you have to identify our would-be masters. It's not always easy to get to the heart of the matter. And there's a whole lot of people out here that believe that this great conspiracy, the Jewish conspiracy, and I have to say it is not. Let's define a couple terms. Let's define what a Jew is. And if you look back in the Old Testament, you find that there were 12 Hebrew tribes. There were 10 northern tribes and 2 southern tribes. The southern tribes were Benjamin and Judah. And it wasn't until a couple hundred years ago, about the time of the formation of the United States, that we started using a just sound for the letter J instead of using it as a Y sound. And so if we were to pronounce correctly, it would be Judah instead of Judah. And the Creator's name is not Jehovah, but Yahweh. And his son's name is not Jesus, which means little Zeus, but Yeshua, or son of Yah. And we can find it in Psalms 68:4 that his name is Yah. And if there is no other name under heaven whereby we must be saved, I think it's important that we get it right. Free people or subjects of an all-powerful superstate. That's a really good question to ask yourself. How important is it for you to be free? It's important enough that if you don't have it, you're not going to pass it on to your children. They won't be passing it on to their grandchildren. So we have those 12 tribes: Reuben, Gad, Asher, Nephilim, Manasseh, Simon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph. And the two southern tribes were Judah and Benjamin. And these people have absolutely nothing to do with this great conspiracy to bring about world government. This world government is being brought about by false Jews, people from Khazars in northern Turkey who only pretended to embrace Judaism so that they would be able to infiltrate and do secretive operations. We have a caller come in here, Rita from Colorado. Come on up, Rita. What do you have?
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, well, interesting on this subject, I just noticed that Reverend Martinez ad, which he had changed to calling George Bush a Zionist, was corrected to what it was in the first place, to call him a Jew. And I think that what people need to understand, even though we've got a Zionist-controlled media, there is at some point it's kind of like a distinction without a difference, because they've kind of created this middle ground between Jews and Christians, and Jews and Christians for many hundreds of years have decided that there isn't a middle ground between Jews and Christians, and that the people for a couple thousand years have understood that the people who keep the faith of Christianity are deserving to call themselves Christians. And this doesn't really, enter into the equation for most people, but for somebody such as George Bush, okay.
Rita, we got a break coming up here. We're going to have to ask you to hold on for a minute. We'll be right back, folks. Please stay tuned. This is Radically Right with Jack Otto talking to Rita from Colorado. Please hold. Welcome back to Radically Right. This is Jack Otto, your host. We're talking to Rita from Colorado. And Rita, before I turn the floor back over to you, I would like to try to encourage people to differentiate between the real Jews and these false Jews. So many times we say Jews versus Christians, but it's not the Jews that are against it. It's the false Jews that have taken such an adversarial stand against us in an effort to aggrandizement of power and a real passion to dominate. Go ahead, Rita. Finish up your point, would you?
Oh, yeah. Well, my point was that I want to show my solidarity with Reverend Martinez, because sometimes we get into this name game thing, and we don't really say what we're really talking about. And, it might be there are good Jews, and I think that Christians have been bending over backwards, trying to wait to see who the good Jews are. We let Jew be the director of Central Intelligence. Now we've got
that's not a Jew. That's a false Jew.
Yeah, right. Well, that...
If we allow them to get away with letting it slip that they're Jews when they're not, then we end up disliking the Jews for what these false Jews are doing.
Right.
You're talking about Chertoff, right?
Right. Now we also...
Nationalism right from Russia.
Right.
He was a big shot in the KGB.
Right. So what I'm really saying is that we've really, Christians have been doing this, bending over backwards, and well, who do the Jews put up? Well, we see a false Jew instead of a real Jew, and how are we supposed to, relate? And how are we supposed to say, what's what? But we live in a world where we understand the distinctions between Christians and Jews, and we know that there isn't a middle ground. There isn't a super religion between Jew Christianity. There might be these people that work between faiths, and make the necessary kinds of changes or agreements, but it's supposed to be set up so that we have kind of separate universes. And so that, in that way, I think it is better for me to say, I agree with Reverend Martinez and to call George Bush a Jew, because George Bush did not adhere to the scriptures that Christians consider an improvement to the faith, over the last 2,000 years, and as a matter of fact, showed himself to be somebody. Let me put it this way: say, there are people who wear different hats, right? Some people have different jobs, and some of the people even have jobs where they're supposed to be supervisors of another person, and make sure that person can work, and do something. But then the other job, it sort of has a conflict. Well, this person put himself in the position where he could play a game of, say, I'm whatever religion I want, whenever that religion, whenever I'm supposed to make a decision in that regard. And, people like me who have been looking at the situation all this time have seen what people have done, and it's actually trying to usurp our inalienable rights.
Oh, yes, this is a big war against the Bill of Rights.
Right, and so these people understood what was going on. They understood that, to make the world their way, what they're really trying to do is to destroy Christianity. And so it isn't, really serving Christians any purpose to say that there are people called Zionist Christians, because it's like saying that there are Christians that don't believe in Christianity, Yeah,
it's an oxymoron. There's no doubt about it.
Right. And so, to that point, I agree with you about the false Jews. I agree with, everything you say. But at the same time, I still have to show my solidarity with Reverend Martinez, and to say that the people that say that they are Christians should respect the rights of Christians. It's basically that way. That's
pretty hard to deny that. That's absolutely true. Those who say they are Christians should have respect for Christianity. Okay, yeah. Well, thank you very much, Rita. Appreciate your call.
Thank you, Jack.
Have a good one. We have Clayton from Missouri. Go ahead, Clayton.
Yeah, I want to make a few points about the Jews, but first I want to make a point about David Koresh. Last week we spoke about David and Waco and the events that took place. Last hour I was listening to a different shortwave station, and this gentleman made a statement that has been bandied about, and it's not true about David Koresh. David Koresh never claimed that he was Jesus Christ. He never claimed that he was the Son of God, or that he was God, or he was divine. What he did say is that he believed that he was a Messiah. Now, the term Messiah literally means anointed one. And what he believed was that he was an anointed man of God.
Hold on, we got a break coming up here. We're going to be right back. We're talking with Clayton from Missouri, and we'll discuss this more on the other side of the break. Welcome back to Radically Right. This is Jack Otto. We're online now with Clayton from Missouri, and he has brought up the subject matter of David Koresh's Waco compound. You know, those Seventh-day Adventists at the Mount Carmel Church, the one the feds called Koresh's Waco compound, have experienced some really intense religious persecution. You know, the videos that show tanks pushing walls inside the compound are damning. Survivors claim that the very first live fire at the shootout came from helicopter machine guns before the ground troops ever arrived. And the main cause of death there was from CS, a warfare gas or powder that's 80 times more powerful than CN tear gas. It was illegal to use on any of that CS on Saddam Hussein's Iraqi troops. But our Attorney General, Janet Johnny Reno, found it acceptable to use on American children at Waco. And on 60 Minutes, Attorney General Janet Reno claimed that they brought it on themselves because they were cultists. And she went on to define what is a cultist. And specifically, she names the following characteristics common to cultists. Number one, they have a strong belief in the Bible and the second coming of Christ. Wait a second. That's the top of the list? And that makes them a cultist, and that's why it was all right to kill them? What kind of logic is this? Number two, they frequently attend Bible studies. Oh, Koresh and his people surely did that, didn't they? And number three, they have a high level of giving to Christian causes. Oh, that sounds like a really good reason for killing children, doesn't it? Some homeschool their children. And you know what? You can hardly blame them because they're not getting much of an education in the public school system. When they win those spelling bees, we find that even though there's a small percentage of people who are homeschooled, the winners of the spelling bees are homeschooled. Number five, they've accumulated survival food. Oh, I've done that. I wonder if they can come and smite me for having some extra food. Number six, they have a strong belief in the Second Amendment. Oh, forbid that anybody should have respect for our Constitution. That makes them a cultist, and we got to kill them? Come on, Janet Reno. That's exactly what she said on 60 Minutes. Number seven, they distrust big government. And you may know some who fit Attorney General Janet Reno's targeted profiles, and do they really deserve the treatment planned for cultists? It seems harsh that those who believe in justice would tolerate that. Janet Reno later admitted to the feds that she also introduced pyrotechnics into the Waco church. When CS is heated, it becomes hydrogen cyanide, the very gas used in execution chambers. Now, Janet Reno has a master's degree in chemistry from Cornell University and therefore must have known what CS and heat would do to those children. I think that kind of negates the federal claim that they all committed suicide. They were murdered. And since the feds brought and occupied the deserted house across the street from Koresh's church, they knew that he went jogging several times a week, and he could have been apprehended at that time without killing the children. And if they really believed he was unstable enough to hurt children, then why did the feds blast that place 24/7 with searchlights and the sounds of rabbits being slaughtered and, forbid Nancy Sinatra singing? Gonna walk all over you. You know, that kind of loud noises and lights would not help an alleged madman to act more rationally. But what the multi-jurisdictional task force implemented was just such a terrorist technique. Survivors claim that David Koresh displaced Ben Roden as the pastor of the Seventh-day Adventist Branch Davidian for good cause. They contend that Ben Roden Branch Davidians at the Mount Carmel Church wanted absolutely nothing to do with the drug trafficking. And this was to the chagrin of law enforcement up the conspiracy chain of command. Some believe that when Bill Clinton spent an extra day at Waco in 1992 just to counsel with Illuminati member Bernie Rappaport, that he got a substantial contribution or promise to take care of Koresh and the Davidians. So I have to agree with you. David Koresh did not say that he was Jesus' Messiah. He said he was a sinful Messiah, and he pointed out to one in the Old Testament that was a latter-day prophet. And it sure looked like they came and killed him just according to the prophecy, doesn't it?
Yeah, I tend to believe that he probably was correct in saying that he was an anointed man of God, because they sure were in a hurry to kill him and do it in the most brutal way possible. And, so, you know, there's been a lot of lies spread about David Koresh, none of which has any foundation in fact, and to smear his name. And unfortunately, too many Christian patriots buy into these lies, and I guess because they really can't come to grips with the fact that the U.S. government went down there and committed premeditated bloody murder.
And there is no other conclusion that we can come to. That was premeditated murder.
Yep.
Now, they claimed the Branch Davidians were making drugs, but they'd already displaced this Ben Rhodes, their man. And that was the excuse for going in there and getting those army tanks to smite these people.
Yep.
It's kind of like the weapons of mass destruction that weren't there.
That's right. Yeah, it was a crime that he didn't have. But, you know, I'm going to jump to the Jews here. 90% of the people that call themselves Jews, 90% are Ashkenazi. Now, we know that before.
I heard 92%, but that's trivial.
Well, you're probably right. That's probably closer to the truth. And, of course, before they were Ashkenazi, they were known as Khazars. And what a lot of people don't know is that before they were Khazars, they were Edomite Jews, who are the descendants of Esau. And if you know your Bible, you know that the Edomites are the hated enemy of the 12 tribes of Israel. And it's no coincidence that today that the 12 tribes of Israel find themselves in subjugation to Esau, the Edomites. And if you know who Israel is, the 12 tribes of Israel, who they are on the planet today, then you can understand Bible prophecy and you know exactly what's going on. But if you do not know who the 12 tribes of Israel are, then you don't know. You're just guessing at Bible prophecy. And I've seen all these Bible prophecy teachers come and go. They make all these predictions that never come to pass. And the reason why is because they don't know who Israel is. And I'm going to tell you, I'm only going to say it once because I take a lot of flack for it, but I'm going to tell you the truth. The 12 tribes of Israel are the white, Anglo-Saxon, Scandinavian, Germanic, and kindred peoples. You can find them in Western Europe, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and what's left of us in South Africa and Zimbabwe. And we are the ones that have been placed in subjugation by these people who call themselves Jews, who are actually Edomites. But
I have to agree with you. And I think if you notice in the scriptures, they talk about how they went up to the north and to the west. And if you take a look at what is north and west of Palestine, you will find the Scandinavian countries in Europe. They're in the western part of Europe. And all the white people there. The children of Ephraim and Manasseh. Go ahead, finish your point.
Well, that's right. When we left the Middle East, we went through the Caucasus Mountains, and that is why today the white people are known as Caucasians. And the thing is these people who call themselves Jews in their own Encyclopedia Judaica in the 1925 edition, they admit that Edom is in modern Jewry. They admit it. They know who they are. I think we need to take their word for what they're telling us.
And we do too.
But we can defeat them with the power.
We don't have any choice. We have to. Our children are at stake.
We can defeat them with the power of prayer. If we pray, and this is so critical, and you understand the importance, if we pray to our Father, Almighty Yahweh, in the name of His Son Yahshua, there is power in the name of Yahweh and power in the name of His Son Yahshua. If we do this in faith, we can defeat these people.
That's why I try to get people to pray together with me at the opening of each program. I, too, agree with you wholeheartedly and think it is important. Any other points, Clayton?
No. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your call, sir. We're going to jump right over to Michael from New York. Go ahead, Michael. Michael, do we have you?
Yes.
Go for it.
How do you do, Jack?
I'm great. Jump right into it.
Yep. I'd like to address the Jews issue, going way back to the Sadducees. The Sadducees, according to my research, has been that they are the true Torah-type Jews, where the modern-day Karaites, which means they haven't embraced any kind of Talmud or any kind of reinterpretation of the Torah.
Yes, the Sadducees were strictly Old Testament Ten Commandment people, and the oral tradition there. But
right, a lot of people tend to blend them together with the Pharisees, which is totally different.
Yes,
which is a little bit, yeah.
And yet we hear that the Messiah spoke against both the Sadducees and the Pharisees.
And for that reason is a good reason, in my opinion, to be against them both. However, I think the Pharisees took control of all of the Jews from way back by making a deal with the Muslims, from what I understand from my research. And they made a deal to represent the Jews as a whole. And they wrote down their Talmud in 1040 A.D., which is why we have that 1040 form, which is the modern-day plunder form that we use to give up our hard-earned earnings that we've pledged to our labor for these debt dollars that are responsible for so much of our suffering, going back to 1933 when the United States went bankrupt under the Rothschilds, basically creating the Great Depression by creating a huge contraction of the money that was available.
Yes, they do that. If you expand the money supply, you have the feeling of prosperity. More people are working, but you see that prices continue to climb as the money becomes expanded and worth less. And
that's right.
As it's contracted, we find that there's less of it in operation. And during the Great Depression, they removed 1/3 of the money from the system. And when you remove that much of the money from the system, it is going to cause a recession. Unless, of course, you're out of work, then you want to call it a depression.
Yep, exactly.
Right? It's the heart of depression. And we don't need Prozac for this depression. We don't need Prozac or Xanax.
And I was about to go into that. That's the second thing I wanted to bring up was the mind control aspects of these things, and you hit right on to it. And that's another thing that's involved with these things. Since they've been plundering this country like maniacs, they've been throwing the fluoride into the water. They've been mercury into our mouths. They're doing all kinds of crazy nonsense, the chemtrails in the air, and there's a billion other things that you can point to. The degradation of all the food supply, basically, of everything that's manufactured. It's designed to make you sick, and they work you like a dog. And the reason why is because they're completely afraid that you're going to wake up and realize what has happened, we have everybody has been pledged as for their labor to be the monetary instruments of this country, and that's what's holding it up. And it's a pretty sad state of affairs.
Well, what you're talking about is absolutely true. We find that we are registered under the Department of Commerce with our birth certificate.
There you go. And that bond number on the back, you see it's an 8-digit number with the two letters on there. And you look at the FRN notes, the Federal Reserve notes, and you'll see it's the same exact type number on there. And that exactly corresponds to the pledges of labor that has been on the Social Security numbers and the birth certificates that people have applied for, and it's completely unwittingly.
Well, we think it's unwitting, but they are conniving, they're planning it, slippery, and sophisticated, too, about it.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes we don't realize how much they've got in place to lead us down some primrose path. And oftentimes the preparations for one of these catastrophes, where they've got some of these characters like this Jew that just shot up Virginia Tech, or some of these other people who have gone off on a nut and destroyed people in a McDonald's or other situation like Columbine. Find that every one of those people are on some of these mood-altering, these antidepressants.
Yep.
Unfortunately, when they get on these antidepressants, it makes you go a little squirrely, but not nearly as squirrely as when you try to get off them.
That's exactly right. One other thing I would like to point out, though, is that a lot of times just like they have these straw man tactics to blame something on something else.
Yeah.
For instance, energy. They suppress a ton of technology, even though they know very well they can create energy without using the oil.
Oh, absolutely.
They pretend as if it's necessary. The same thing with the mind control. They pretend as if it's blamed on Prozac, whereas they're using a lot more high-level techniques to implement it, and it's not really necessary to use these drugs.
Well, you want me to hold you over, Michael?
Yeah, if you could.
Okay, we've got a break coming up here. I hear music in the background. Welcome back to Radically Right. We're talking to Michael from New York. Go ahead and finish making your point, Michael.
Hey, Jack. I'd just like to bring up this one last point. I've had this suspicion that I've been under a mind control project for quite a long time, and I've had a lot of, I don't know how to say, evidence of various kinds, in my opinion, that this has been going on. But I had a hair mineral analysis done, which says it completes the complete spectrum of different minerals, and I found that my rubidium and my lithium was astronomically high, way above the charts. And I looked it up, and I found that rubidium has the ability to reduce the circadian rhythm of a human, which means instead of thinking you have a 24-hour cycle, you think you have less than that, say 20 hours. So that 4 hours can just disappear. Okay, when you're gone. And the other interesting aspect of rubidium is that it has the tendency to help you suppress traumatic events, okay, and then return to a normal baseline as if it didn't happen. So if something happens during that time, you just go right back to thinking you just feel as if nothing had happened during that time. The other thing is it makes you fearless and also has a tendency to kill cancers. But I just wanted to bring that up, and anybody who thinks they might be involved with mind control programs, I know you've had a program in the past regarding that, to get a hair mineral analysis checkup and take a look at that, because I haven't seen too many people talking about it, and I think it's one of the important elements to it. It's a non-toxic element, rubidium, but it does have a tendency to facilitate this mind control aspect that's been going on.
Well, we find that as we go on here that this mind control is much more pervasive than we ever thought it was, and oftentimes the victims are programmed to get up in the middle of the night and still somewhat in trance.
There you go.
Go to a meeting and participate in the meeting and then go back home and have complete amnesia for the event.
Exactly.
There's so many times that we don't realize that individuals are, without any awareness of what's really happened, being programmed. Now that MK Ultra is something else. This is what we're talking about.
MK Ultra goes back to Project Bluebird, and Fritz Springermeyer was one of the best deprogrammers out there, and they set him up just like they set up Mark Kernke with a fake bank robbery, and got him tossed in jail, and he's still in jail, and he's in. He's been in jail for 5 or 6 years now, and he won't get out until about 2012. What's that?
It was 7 years, and he just got out in the middle of March. Matter of fact, it was right on March the 15th.
Oh, Kornke you're talking about.
Yeah, Mark Kornke. No.
Yeah, he got out.
They've still got him.
Fritz Springermeyer won't get out till 2012, from what I've read about his earliest release date. That's possible, and he's been the best with Cisco Wheeler. He's put out a bunch of documents, including how to create a undetectable mind control slave. Is one of the documents he's put out, and it's extremely elaborate, and it details a lot of the program.
Hold on, Michael. We've got a break coming up here. We're going to have to take a moment to patronize our sponsors. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to Radically Right. This is Jack Otto. We're talking with Michael from New York. Michael, do you want to get in your last point?
Sure. I'd just like to say, don't be so naive as to think it can't happen to you about this mind control. It's very widespread, and they've mastered it. It goes back to what they call the ancient mystery religions, going back to ancient Egypt, and before that, the knowledge that this traumatic experiences can create a split in the personality, and the fact that they can attach a hypnotic cue in order to link back into one personality versus another, and to build up more sophisticated things on that. And nowadays it's done with silent subliminal audio, by scalar audio waves, and I'd like to direct everyone towards Tom Bearden for doing the research as to this technology as far as it. This is the technology they use these days. It's highly advanced. It's not like any of the other electromagnetic science that you've ever been taught in school. It's not taught in any schools. The scalar waves, which is the true wave. The scalar, the electromagnetic radiation is exactly that. It's radiation. It degrades over time, and it's basically worthless for going through long distances. And this stuff is scalar waves. It goes through everything. And they originally were researching this. It was discovered by Nikola Tesla, and I think everybody should be keenly aware of it and look up Tom Bearden and look up this information and look into it, because there's no doubt that this is on a wide scale. You know, it's not just a few people getting involved with this. And, you know, I just hope everybody is not so haughty that they think that this can't happen to them.
Well, these scalar waves or standing waves are similar to the way our mind works. So if they use them, they can literally make an internal impression upon us as though we feel that the thought in our mind came from our own self.
That's right.
And most people
and that's
have.
What they do.
Go ahead.
I believe you're exactly right, and they do that. They do that when you're sleeping. They try to program you into believing certain things, or to try to sway you off certain ideas. It depends on how strong your constitution is the bottom line, and they hate Christians for the very reason that their constitution is so strong that it's very difficult, and they cannot pull people off it. And that's one of the reasons why they target them for such harassment and kind of diabolical persecution.
Most people have no understanding of hypnosis. And most Christians really don't want to know because they believe it's an evil force of the devil.
You're absolutely right, yeah.
And that is not this is not a case of what you don't know won't hurt you. Like the proverbial ostriches that bury their heads in the sand, those who think that ignorance is bliss cannot readily deal with approaching danger. And those who know nothing about suggestion cannot defend against what they do not realize is happening.
There you go.
Hypnosis is stripped of all the mumble-jumble. The essence is really quite simple.
That's right.
It's truly relaxed. The barrier between the conscious mind and the inner mind is lowered. And the inner mind is not subconscious. Sub means below, and it would be more appropriate to refer to it as the superior consciousness because it does so much more than we give it credit for. If we quit thinking about our breathing, then the inner mind will take over that responsibility, and breathing continues without effort on our part. The inner mind controls the beating of our heart and mixes 200 chemicals in our bodies without conscious thought. Both important relevant memories come to mind when needed, and it occurs without the effort of conscious thought. We're going to talk more about this on the other side. We were talking about hypnosis and how access to the powerhouse of our own inner mind is enhanced by relaxation and or repetition. That enables people to input new habit formations or retrieve repressed memories. Professional hypnotists facilitate that by putting the subject in a comfortable position and encourage relaxation by repeating the suggestion that efforts be made to relax. Once relaxed, a mental image of the desired goal is painted in the mind's eye of the subject, and it becomes more profoundly impressed than it would be if the person had not thoroughly relaxed first. The inner mind governs the autonomic nervous system, which includes your reflex action. That is movement which occurs without your thinking about it, such as the way your hand may jerk back from a hot stove before you even have a chance to think, oh, my goodness, that's hot. I'm going to remove my hand. Now, martial artists utilize these principles in their own development, and few people realize that true martial art philosophy is more about personal development than it is fighting. And there are times when you have no time to think. You must act spontaneously. And if you program your inner mind with the right things, then the right time, the right things will pop out. The inner mind accepts input best when you are relaxed. And that is part of why martial artists continue past the point of being tired, so as to drive a technique deep into the inner mind where it will become part of the habit formation and reflex action. Now, hypnotists touch the inner mind by getting you to consciously work on relaxing each part of your body and then demonstrate powers that most of us never even try to tap. Salesmen relax you with their friendly manner and perhaps even tell you a joke that will cause you to lower your defenses and let them in. Runners report getting a second wind or a high in which they are no longer tired and find that they actually do their best thinking. All pass through hypnosis when they're going to sleep or when they awake. Now, they got big names for that, hypnagogic and hypnopompic. It is a phenomenon of hypnosis when we turn from a long trip and cannot believe the time passed so quickly. And we experience similar losses of time while reading an interesting book, and it is for the same reason. The power of relaxation may be better understood by examining its opposite, tension. An extreme example of tension is that which may be caused by fear when suddenly you are surprised by danger, such as a mugger or a bear. Now, some people tense so much in times of danger that they are frozen by fear and cannot do anything but shake and stammer some unintelligible phrase like, I'm not. If they could only relax a little, they would be able to hand over their money or run or something other than just knock their knees and stammer. Now, in martial arts, they practice relaxation so much that it becomes a habit. The breathing techniques facilitate relaxation and hypnosis, and proper execution of breathing is nearly opposite of conventional wisdom. Instead of sucking in air with effort and then relaxing to exhale, it is better to exhale completely and relax the inhale. A momentary pause at the top of the inhale will slow down the exhale, and the only effort made is at the very end of a long and gradual exhale. This purges carbon dioxide, and if repeated enough, it can become a habit. Now, if the gateway to the inner mind is as simple as relaxation and repetition, consider the power of television and movies. People sit in front of the screen with the expressed intent of relaxing for a while. The images presented to their minds are crystal clear, and those impressions most desired by the powers behind the television make sure that such programming is repeated. And despite the relatively smooth image appearance of these motion pictures and television, they are actually pulsating images. Oftentimes, people do not think about what they're seeing or hearing on TV. They just sit there like a sponge and absorb the input. And this is so insidious that people often cannot bring to mind the previous program watched because they weren't paying attention. They were just sitting there soaking it up and absorbing. Commercial airtime can sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars per minute for those who want to make a big impact in 60 seconds. It must be effective or the advertisers would go broke, paying so much for something worthless. Then the moguls would like for us to believe that the 2-hour movie that follows has no bearing on anything except our need for entertainment being gratified. Not true. The television defines reality for us, and that people become more like the sordid soap operas they watch, more like the violent drama pumped into them, and more like the scheming, confident artists they adore because they seem to get something for nothing. Children act like cartoon characters in the Three Stooges because it has affected them. America has become and is becoming more of a police state. The television has much responsibility in that development. But programs like Cops conditions the populace to expect police to act violently and demonstrates to real-life police officers how they are expected to act. No matter what station one watches, when people clash with the police, the civilians lose. even when the police are unbelievably crooked, like the Dukes of Hazzard with Boss Hogg, they consistently manipulate their power effectively to stay on top. And the consistency with which that is depicted on TV causes all but the most stout-hearted to give up all hope of fighting City Hall. It was Thomas Jefferson that said, when the government fears the people, there is liberty. And when the people fear the government, tyranny. America was supposed to be founded on the principle of unalienable rights given by God, and the formation of a constitutionally limited Republican form of government was solely for the purpose of preventing others from encroaching on those rights. And we have strayed away from that course by following the square beacon, the television, also known as the idiot box and the boob tube. Let me finish addressing the subject matter that Michael brought up. And I think it's important that we note that even though all the real Jews are not perfect people, there's a big difference between doing something wrong and being set out to enslave the whole world. And that is the province of the false Jews. And I think more of us have to separate our thinking, making sure we understand the true paradigm here, the true understanding of what is transpiring, so that we don't blame others for the fault of these false Jews from Khazaria. You know, the great ideal of Judaism is that the whole world should be imbued with Jewish teachings, and that in a universal brotherhood of nations, a greater Judaism is in fact all the separate races and religions should disappear. And that's according to the Jewish World in February 9th of 1983. Now, way back 100 years, that was not 1983, that was 18. Sorry. Back in 1896, Theodor Herzl, who wrote The Jewish State, said, and I quote him, "We, the Jews, are a people, one people. When we think, we become revolutionary proletariat, the subordinate officers of a revolutionary party. When we rise, there also arises our terrible power of the purse." Back in London, 1918, there was Angelo S. Rappaport wrote an article called The Pioneers of the Revolution, and on page 250, Paul Stanley says, Jews in Russia, their total mass, responsible for the revolution. Again, I think it's important for us to say false Jews, because they're all ensued from these Khazar warriors. Now, back in 1918, August 8th of 1918, in the Knickerbocker Press, Albany, New York, Bernard Baruch said, "We are living in a highly organized state. State is all the individual is of importance only as he contributes to the welfare of the state. His property is only his, and the state does not need it. He must hold his life and possessions at the call of the state." Welcome back to Radically Right. We're going through some of the sayings from Zionist organizations right now, pointing out their own words and their own contention. And in the American Hebrew on September 10th of 1920, we have a most poignant quotation. "The Bolshevist revolution in Russia was the work of Jewish brains, of Jewish dissatisfaction, of Jewish planning, whose goal is to create a new order in the world. What was performed in so excellent a away in Russia, thanks to Jewish brains and because of Jewish dissatisfaction and by Jewish planning, shall also, through the same Jewish mental and physical forces, become a reality all over the world. That was from the American Hebrew, September 10th, 1920. I think it would be more accurate if they keep bringing up the word false Jews so that we can differentiate between those who really are behind this trust for a new world order. Now, there was a book by George Kent Rivers called The World Significance of the Russian Revolution. And in that book, he says, Bolshevism is a religion and a faith. How could those half-converted believers dream to vanquish the truthful and the faithful of their own creed, those holy crusaders who had gathered around the red standard of the prophet Karl Marx, and who fought under the daring guidance of those experienced officers of all latter-day revolutions, the Jews? And again, I think it would be important to say false Jews. Now, Karl Marx wasn't his real name. His real name was Kissel Mordecai Levy. He was the son of a lawyer from Germany. He worked for Horace Greeley in the New York Times. He was an atheist, to some extent. But he was more anti-theist, dedicated to the force of evil. There was a guy named Maurice Samuel, a man of Jewish extraction, who wrote a book called, or an article called, You Gentiles. And on page 155 of that Harcourt Brace text in 1924, he said, we Jews, the destroyers, will remain destroyers forever. Nothing that you will do will meet our needs and demands. We'll forever destroy because we need a world of our own. I don't think so. I don't think that's the truth of the matter. They can't live in a world by their own. It'd be like vampires living on vampires. They have to have fresh blood prey. There was another guy named Marcellus Eli Ravage, who wrote in the 1926 issue of Century magazine, you have not begun to appreciate the depth of our guilt. We are intruders. We are subverters. We have taken your natural world, your ideals, your destiny, played havoc with them. We have been at the bottom of not merely the latest Great War, but of every other major revolution in your history. We have brought discord and confusion and frustration into your personal and public life. We are still doing it. No one can tell how long we shall go on doing it. Who knows what great and glorious destiny might have been yours if we had left you alone. Then there's Professor F.A. Ossendowski, who wrote an article called The 19th Century and After, that was in London, and on page 29 of this publication that was published in January of 1926, it says, and I quote, it is often said that Judaism is the driving force of communism. But this does not prove anything beyond that which is expected and only natural. It is surprising that Judaism should become the fermenting and destructive element in countries which have always despised and persecuted it. That particular facility for intrigue, stratagem, conspiracies, and that patient, almost uncanny waiting for the hour of never-failing revenge are all characteristics of the chosen people. And that's by Professor F.A. Ossendowski, printed the 19th Century and After in February of 1926. Then there's René Le Neuvron in Mercury of France in May of 1927. He said, the two internationals of finance and revolution work with ardor. They are the two fronts of the Jewish international. There is a Jewish conspiracy against all nations. End of quote. And I again would like to say it's much more applicable to say false Jews. Then there's the atheistic Rabbi Stephen S. Wise, who said, I am not an American citizen of Jewish faith. I am a Jew. I have been an American for 63 years, but I've been a Jew for 4,000 years. That's a quote from the year 1933. Here's another quote I think you're going to find significant. Anti-Semitism is so instinctive that it may quite simply be caused one of the primal instincts of man, one of the important instincts by which the race helps to preserve against total destruction. I cannot emphasize the matter too strongly. Anti-Semitism is not, as Jews have tried to make the world believe, an active prejudice. It is a deeply hidden instinct with which every man is born. He remains unconscious of it, as of all other instincts of self-preservation, until something happens to awaken it. Just as when something flies in the direction of your eyes, the eyelids close instantly and of their own accord, so swiftly and surely does the instinct of anti-Semitism awaken in a man. There is not a single instant when the Jews have not fully deserved the bitter fury of their prosecutors. That was Samuel Roth, Jews Must Live, page 64 of the 1934 book. I know I have to say this, but in bringing everybody under the Zionist banner, we must never forget that our goals are the safety and security of the state of Israel foremost. Our goal will be realized in Yiddishkeit, in a Jewish life being lived every place in the world, and our goals will have to be realized not merely by what we impel others to do. And here in the country, it means frequently working through the umbrella of the President's Conference, Jewish organization. Or it might be working in unison with other groups that feel as we do. That it, too, might be working in unison with other groups. And we think that Zionism means and what our challenge is. That was Rabbi Miller, the American Jewish Examiner, page 14 of March 5th, 1970. Here's one from Rabbi Martin Siegel of the New York Magazine, page 32, January 18th, 1972. He said, I am devoting my lecture in this seminar to a discussion of the possibility that we are now entering a Jewish century, a time when the spirit of the community, the non-ideological blend of the emotional and rational, and the resistance to categories and forms will emerge through the forces of anti-nationalism to provide us with a new kind of society. I call the process the Judaization of Christianity, because Christianity will be the vehicle through which this society becomes Jewish. Then there's Nate Rosenberg of the Denver Allied Federation of International Jewish News. And in January 30th of 1976, Nate Rosenberg said, Federation plays a major part in Jewish life throughout the world. There is a federation in every community of the world where there is a substantial number of Jews. Today, there is a central movement that is capable of mustering all its planning, financial, and political resources within 24 hours, geared to handling any particular issue proportionally. We have more power than any other comparable group, far beyond our numbers. Reason is that we are probably the most well-organized minority in the world. Then there was Rabbi Reichhorn, who said, with gold, we can buy the most rebellious conscience, can subsidize all state loans, then thereafter hold the states at our mercy. Already the principal banks, the exchanges of the entire world, the credits of all the governments are in our hands. Then it was Oscar Levy that said, we Jews who have posed as saviors of the world are today nothing else but the world's seducers, its destroyers, its incendiaries, its executioners. Then there's Harry Klein, who wrote, Jewish leaders are crazy for power. Henry Klein was an insider that broke loose. And he said that Jewish leaders want world power, nothing less will do. That they have many Jews believing that they are the chosen people. Jews were chosen for destruction after their leaders caused Jesus to be executed. All Jews have suffered since. A large part of the so-called persecution is artificially created to keep Jews scared and to stimulate cash contributions. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been extracted from them in the past 25 years. That's Henry Klein. His great text, Jewish leaders are crazy for power. We must remember, when they speak out against their own, they do so at great peril, too. What kind of people are we? Are we really free people? Or are we the subjects of an all-powerful superstate that's got a right to tell you what's good for you? I think it's important for us to understand the distinction here. I think it's important for us to be on our guard. I think it's important for us to speak out, even if it's not popular, even if it is something that causes you some pressure with your friends and your family to bring the subject matter up again. Try to be artful. Find new ways to present it. Because really do need to understand what's going on here. There was a guy named Charlie Reese that wrote in the Christian Science Monitor and published in its December 9th issue a story about Thomas Stouffer, a consulting economist who said recently that the total cost of U.S. support for Israel since 1973 is $1.6 trillion, or twice the cost of the Vietnam War. Now, this is relevant because the Israelis have just demanded from the United States another $4 billion to cover the cost of their oppression of the Palestinians, as well as an $8 billion loan guarantee. Now, there isn't a state in the Union that's not facing financial crisis, and if the U.S. government caves in yet again to the Israeli lobby on this matter, it will be prima facie evidence that the mass insanity or worse corruption since the administration of President Ulysses S. Grant. His real name was Hiram. He was an insider. Now, Stouffer made his speech in a lecture commissioned by the U.S. Army War College for the conference at the University of Maine, and he has converted past aid into $2,001 and counts its cost as follows. Israel has been given $240 billion. That's in current dollars. While Egypt has been given $117 billion. And Jordan $22 billion as bribes for signing a peace treaty with Israel. And in 1973, when the Arabs allegedly attacked Israel in an effort to recover territory taken by Israel in the 1967 war, U.S. support for Israel triggered the oil embargo. And this, according to Stouffer, kicked off a recession that cost $420 billion of output. And the boosted oil prices cost another $450 billion. The necessity to build a strategic oil reserve, another $134 billion. And he points out that the United States has already guaranteed $10 billion in commercial loans to Israel and $600 billion in housing loans. And he expects the U.S. Treasury will end up paying for all of these. He goes on, listing more costs, direct and indirect. And Israel, for example, is the only recipient of foreign aid allowed to spend a sizable percentage of the money on Israeli products rather than American. It's the only country from which our defense contractors are required to buy a certain amount of Israeli-made equipment. It is the only foreign country that gets its aid in a lump sum and then invests it, some in U.S. bonds, so that the taxpayers not only can make an annual gift to Israel, but also to pay Israel interest on that gift. We've got a break coming up. We're going to be right back. Welcome back to Radically Right. This is Jack Otto. The fact is that the Israeli government and its powerful lobby have taken advantage of the good-heartedness of the American people. The American people are generous, but never generous enough to satisfy Israeli demands for more of our people's hard-earned tax dollars. It's one thing to provide emotional support. It's one thing even to guarantee coming to the defense of another country if it is attacked. It's quite another to undertake the permanent subsidy of a foreign country, something our federal government does not even do for its states. We have all kinds of problems in the United States that need attention. And it's time to tell those Israelis, we can no longer support you. We can no longer afford to subsidize a foreign country. We've gone from being the world's greatest creditor nation to being the world's largest debtor nation. Should we really go further in debt so that we can give $15,500 to every man, woman, and child Jew in Israel? It's America's policy of absolute support for Israel and Israel's cruel treatment of the Palestinians that's such a big part of the problem with terrorism. We stand convicted in the eyes of the Muslim world of practicing a double standard by condoning Israel's human rights violations and protecting it from international sanctions. That, too, is a terrible price that Americans can no longer afford. If you want to keep on getting the truth, you have to remember that freedom is not free. It's important for you to support Republic Broadcasting so that Republic Broadcasting supports you. If you know of somebody else that's doing a better job of bringing the truth and getting right to the heart of the matter, support them. But if you're like me, you can't think of anybody doing a better job, I would strongly suggest you support the Republic Broadcasting Organization. Support them as though your children and your grandchildren's freedom is dependent upon it.